Hello, this is the transit signal prioritization and Center Street proposal community meeting. Is March 10th, 2021. My name is Ryan O'Malley. I'm the ward for city councilor. And tonight we are joined by at-large Councillor Stephen Winslow. Full disclosure, this recording is of the presentation that was just provided. It was discovered that we were not recording the meeting when we did the presentation. We started the recording partway through the meeting when we were doing questions and answers. So I'm going to give the presentation again and go through all of that and then merge these two videos together so that the public can watch these videos after the fact. So again, this is related to transit signal prioritization and the Center Street bus and bike accommodations. Today's agenda includes overview of what we're going to talk about in terms of those two things that were just mentioned. We're going to go over prior public engagement. We're going to go over the city's complete streets policy. We're going to cover equity and transportation. We're going to go over different types of infrastructure funding, an overview of grants through MassDOT in the federal government, particularly their Shared Streets Grant program. We're going to talk about transit signal prioritization and what that means. And on scope, it's going to be Salem, Main, and Center Streets. We're going to talk about the Center Street proposal. We're going to go over what the traffic analysis showed, and we're going to go through the specific segments. And then we're going to end with questions. So for this particular community meeting, as I stated, we're going to talk about transit signal prioritization, which is here on the left. Here you're going to see the upper left-hand corner image of those four is a bus approaching a light, and there's different type of technology. It could be GPS, it could be an optical emitter that basically allows the lights to detect buses or fire engines or police vehicles, and even emergency vehicles like ambulances. And the goal is to allow the light to let these vehicles through in a more timely manner. On the right, you're going to see the Center Street bus and bike accommodations, and this is an image from Florence Street, which is kind of our pilot for this. And it's basically making room for buses in a very heavily utilized corridor. It serves about 10 bus routes and over 7,500 or 7,500 daily bus riders. This particular project and initiative is informed by prior public engagement, particularly the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan, which was kicked off in 2017. And during 2017, the Complete Streets Task Force held a robust public engagement process with the help of MAPC, which is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and Tool Design, an engineering firm that has been helping us with this project also. This project addresses a critical need on Center Street, which was highlighted by the community, and crash data that we show here on the right. Here you'll see that the Center Street corridor, which goes through the center of the screen here, is home to over 8 crash clusters, both just vehicle crash clusters as well as pedestrian crash clusters. It's a very dangerous stretch of road, and it was highlighted during the public engagement process during the Complete Streets policy that this really needs to be looked at and made much safer. The city of Malden was very proactive in passing a complete streets policy in order to make sure that we're doing our part to make our roads safer. In 2016, Mayor Gary Christensen developed and signed the City of Malden's Complete Streets Policy with the help of Ward 1 Councillor Peg Crow. On the right, you'll see the first page of the Complete Streets Policy, and you'll see it was signed on October 13th, 2016. On the left at the bottom, there's a small excerpt of the objective of the Complete Streets Policy, and it states, "The City of Malden recognizes that users of various modes of transportation, including but not limited to pedestrians, cyclists, transit and school bus riders, motorists, delivery and service personnel, freight haulers, and emergency responders are legitimate users of roadways and deserve safe accessibility. Quote, all users includes users of all ages, abilities, and income levels. This recognizes that all roadway projects, including new construction, maintenance, and reconstruction, present potential opportunities to apply complete streets design principles. And that is what this presentation and proposal is doing tonight. The goal is to implement over $1 million in improvements that we're getting through a grant in order to really make our roads safer in compliance with our complete streets policy. After the mayor proactively signed the complete streets policy in 2016, Councillor Peg Crow was instrumental in leading the city council to unanimously approve a resolution that, quote, to support the mayor's complete streets policy. Here on the right, you'll see how the actual action details of how this was passed. You'll see there's a lot of yeahs, a lot of yays over here, and it did pass unanimously by the city council. If you're a city council wonk and you know a lot about city council, you'll see that it's a vote from 8 to 0. And that is because there were a few members who were not present at that particular meeting, but it did pass unanimously. On a national level, there's a conversation that is developing and growing, which is related to equity and transportation infrastructure. And it's starting to be driven by the Department of Transportation for the U.S. government, and a few quotes from a recent article. Addressing the inequities built into the national transportation system would require dismantling and retooling decades worth of physical infrastructure and addressing a more subtle but equally powerful culture that comes from less visible parts of DOT's work, like in setting standards for how roads are designed. This is part of what President Biden's ambitious quote, Build Back Better plan calls for, including an express desire to redo streets and main arteries in communities, repair and lay down new sidewalks, redo streetscapes and lighting, among other things. So what we're going to be seeing is the federal government is going to be most likely retooling their standards when it comes to how we design our roads. And, Massachusetts is lucky that we're kind of ahead of the curve because we have the Complete Streets program. And I cannot say it enough. This is because of the hard work of other people who really were able to get us here when it comes to complete streets. And I really am thankful to the fact that we do have complete streets as a policy now. Why do we need equity in transportation? Well, transportation infrastructure. Well, one of the things that a really concerning trend is that there's been a 45% increase in people struck and killed while walking. The last 4 years were the most deadly in 3 decades. So this trend is getting worse. Pedestrians being struck and killed is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And tragically, here in Malden, we recently had a pedestrian killed, an elderly resident of the Linden area. This is something that we do need to take seriously and make sure that these deaths are not in vain. And the challenge and the reason why we talk about equity here is that, like many other issues that we face in our society, the risk is not evenly distributed. Older adults, people of color, people walking in low-income communities are disproportionately represented in fatal car crashes involving people walking, even after controlling for differences in population size and walking rates. So what you see here in this graphic shows that the burden is not shared equally. This is the relative pedestrian danger by race and ethnicity. And you'll see that many of our people of color communities are more heavily impacted by pedestrian danger. And why is that? The reason is because, or one of the reasons is because our roads have been intentionally designed dangerously. You know, there have been many communities of color, many ethnic communities who have been pretty much destroyed by road projects being driven through their neighborhoods, and by the fact that oftentimes improvements to make streetscapes safer are dependent on property taxes. And if you live in an area that has a lower tax rate and has a lower ability to really utilize and improve its infrastructure, you have a disproportionate investment. The same thing happens with schools in inner cities, and it's something that should be rectified. And there are grants out there, both state and federal, to allow that to happen. That is what we're proposing tonight. Additionally, you'll see that older adults are disproportionately killed. And this has unfortunately shown very true here in Malden. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see that people walking in lower income neighborhoods are also killed far more often. And I think that the next slide will show that. So again, people walking in wealthier neighborhoods are killed at far lower rates than people who live in lower income areas. This is an equity issue, and we should be utilizing the grant funds that we have available to try to address this inequity. Because failing to act is consenting to more preventable deaths. These deaths cannot be in vain. How do we pay for this? This is the question. How are we going to pay for this? And I've alluded to it a few times in this particular presentation. The various possible funding sources for infrastructure projects include primarily three different pots of money. The first one is Chapter 90 funds, which are approved by the state or provided by the state and 100% under the control of the mayor. No city council approval is required to use those funds. The second pot is local taxes, so your property taxes on your home or excise taxes on your vehicles. And the third pot is state or federal grants, which is what we're applying for and which is what we are looking to do this project with. The Community Connections grant is one of the things that's going to pay for the transit signal prioritization, or we hope will. And then the Shared Streets and Spaces grant, we hope will help pay for the improvements on Center Street. And the final pot of money that we could apply for, or one of the final pots, is Complete Streets, but we're not proposing using Complete Streets grant funding for this proposal. Here's an overview of some of the grants that we just referenced. In 2020, in the fall, MassDOT's Shared Streets and Spaces program provided municipalities with grants ranging from $5,000 to $300,000 in allotments. Total, $10.2 million was allocated to 103 municipalities. As you'll see here on the bottom, in the fall of last year, Malden received over $250,000 of this. If you do the math quickly, 10.2 million divided by 103 is just under $100,000. So you'll see Malden is batting above its average when it comes here. We're getting more grant funding. And the reason being is because we have a great relationship with the state, and the state knows that if they give us grant funding, we're going to do the right thing, and we're going to really invest it in projects that help make our community, help make our transportation infrastructure more equitable. You'll see here an example of one of the projects that the Shared Streets and Spaces grant paid for. This is on Florence Street and is served as a pilot for what we're proposing on Center Street. It is a dedicated bus lane. And let's go over what we're proposing tonight. The first proposal is for a Community Connections grant, which will provide transit signal prioritization. We'll get into what that means in a second, on Salem Street, which is valued at $225,000. The second is transit signal prioritization on Main and Center Streets. and those are valued at $350,000. A portion of Main Street will also be in Everett, so a small portion of these funds will go to improving the lights in Everett, which benefits the Malden community because the bus lanes do not respect city boundaries, and nor should they. Finally, we're going for a MassDOT Shared Streets and Spaces grant program for the Center Street bus accommodations, which were valued at a rate or a grant of $491,000. The combined total investment is over $1 million. It's $1,066,000. As you'll see here on the lower right, we are applying during the March funding cycle, and the goal, we would be notified of the award by the end of March, and we look forward to implementing it if we are awarded it in May. So let's go over transit signal prioritization. What exactly does that mean? You'll see lights here, so that's a little bit of a clue. So again, the transit signal prioritization grant combined value is $575,000. The goal here would be to get new traffic signal control boxes that would be much smarter and be able to detect buses or public safety vehicles like fire apparatus or police vehicles. And we're also looking into whether or not we can also have our ambulances hooked up to this program. One of the really important things here is that the City of Malden will maintain control of this new system. And the streets that are in scope, and I've mentioned before, are Main, Salem, and Center Streets. And just so people kind of understand, it could include getting new lights on the poles, but primarily it's going to involve having new brains for our signal control boxes, so that our street lights are smart. And how are they going to detect these fire apparatus or the buses and the emergency vehicles? Well, there's a few different technologies, and our city engineer will maintain control and decide which type of technology we'll go with. But it could be a optical emitter where the light detects a light. There's a receiver on the light pole that detects a light that's coming off the vehicle. It could also be using GPS or a combination of both. And the gist of it is, as a bus or a emergency vehicle is approaching a light, the light will know that vehicle is there, and will allow, it might keep the green light on longer to allow the bus or emergency apparatus to go through the intersection in a smooth manner and keeping traffic flowing. Excuse me. So now we're going to move on to the Center Street proposal. And this proposal looks to balance automobiles, buses, bicycles, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Again, the Center Street grant is valued at $491,000, and you'll see a site map here. The blue lines represent lanes. During the 70s, when there was significant urban renewal in downtown Malden, there was a decision to expand and create a new Route 60. And as you know, if you've been driving the area, Route 60 is one lane in each direction, pretty much in all of Malden and every other community to the east, and is one lane in each direction, just past the train station by the fire station by Malden Center, going to the west. It's only right in our downtown core where we have the most pedestrians that it balloons into this 4-lane highway. It is dangerous. There are a number of crash clusters in this area, and the goal of this project is to make this area safer for all users. So again, what are the project goals? To increase pedestrian safety with new crosswalks and pavement markings, improve travel times for all modes of transit, add significant left and right turning lanes, retime signals and link with the transit signal prioritization to make automobiles and buses all move through here quickly, and to improve this artificial bottleneck effect that is being created by this This corridor going from a 1 lane in each direction to a 2 lane in each direction and then back down to 1. You're basically just creating artificial traffic right in the downtown of our community. And another really valuable benefit is it will connect the Northern Strand Trail to the MBTA. This is a significant transit connection. So why implement this project? There are a massive amount of buses that go through Center Street. There are over 7,500 daily riders on Center Street. Later in the presentation, you'll see 7,600. That's the more up-to-date figure. It is a large population of low-income and minority communities are served by this route. When it comes to the automobile counts, through our traffic study and our analysis, the westbound morning rush hour has 898 vehicles per hour. In the eastbound evening rush hour, that figure is 908 per hour. An important statistic here is that a single lane capacity is 1,200 cars per hour. So as you'll see, both evening and morning rush hour commutes, a single through lane with significant lanes in order to get the turning vehicles out of that travel lane does accommodate the 1,200 max that we're talking about, or the 800 and 900 that we're talking about here. A particularly important point, or a nota bene, is that the traffic volumes at Jackson Street have actually decreased from 2015 to 2018. This is before COVID-19, and it could reflect a number of shifting work habits as well as modes of transportation. Lastly, why implement this? And I've kind of harped on this before. Emergency vehicles will greatly benefit from this project. They'll benefit from the transit signal prioritization. They will also benefit from dedicated lanes that they can can travel through our community in a timely manner when there's an emergency. There's also a very significant bus service delay in this particular route. Malden, in this Center Street location you see here on the right in yellow, is actually one of the top 10 worst bus delay areas in the entire MBTA service map. So we are looking to address this because it is an equity issue when it comes to the members of our community who are using this particular segment. And this is why. It's 10 bus routes on Center Street. You see them there on the left. And the total ridership is between 7,500 and 7,600 weekly riders. That is a massive amount of people in our community. And again, going back to the equity, we are an environmental justice community. And as you'll see here, the location that Center Street is located in our community is actually designated an EJ community for 3 different designations, all 3 that they're available, for its minority population, for its income levels, and for its English isolation. Investing in this neighborhood helps improve equity in our community. Here are some statistics on bus ridership demographics in Malden. 30% are minority, 41% are low income, and 32% are car-free households. I'm going to go through the various segments of the Center Street proposal, and these are the 4 general segments that I'll be going through. Malden Center and MBTA station to Main Street. Main Street going from Center to Pleasant. Main Street to Holden in the Northern Strand Trail. Holden Street to Franklin Street. So in this section, we're going to talk about the Malden Center MBTA station to Main Street. Here you'll see And just to orient you, on the left here, you'll see Commercial Street. On the lower portion here, you're going to see this is the National Grid site. You'll see Canal Street right here, and this is the Stop and Shop parking lot. So on the westbound approach, you see there's a red dedicated bus lane, which turns into a dotted or dashed shared right turn lane onto Commercial Street. You'll see that there is a dedicated through lane for traffic, and you'll see there's an expanded dedicated left turn lane. The reason why we have these significant turning lanes is to get the vehicles who are turning out of the way of the vehicles that are going straight. This improves traffic commutes for everyone involved. On the eastbound direction, you see there is a dedicated left turning lane going onto what is Jackson Street, and there's a shared right turn lane going onto Canal Street. Jackson to Middlesex, on the westbound approach, again, you'll see there's the Malden Square bus stop, which is a very busy bus stop for the square. That's located at approximately, at the National Grid electrical substation next to the CDB garage. It goes west and turns into a dotted shared right turn lane onto Jackson. And again, there's the dedicated through lane. On the eastbound approach, you'll see there's a Stop and Shop bus stop, which is a very busy bus stop. A lot of our community uses it. A lot of bus riders, a lot of elderly bus riders who don't have the mobility to go and carry these heavy bags back to their homes. You'll see that there is a shared right turn lane to get into the Stop and Shop parking lot. And there's also a shared right turn lane, which would get you onto Middlesex to the right of this. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here. This is the intersection of Middlesex and Route 60 or Center Street. And this brings you to Main Street and the CDBG garage, or community development, the Central Business District garage. On the westbound approach, you'll see that there's improved crosswalks throughout the area. There's a dedicated through lane, and there's a shared right lane to go on Middlesex as well as into the parking garage on the north side of your screen, or on the upper side of your screen. On the eastbound approach, you'll see there's dedicated left turning lanes to go into the parking garage at Middlesex and onto Main Street, which is a significant turn for many vehicles as well as the buses. And there's a shared right turn lane at Middlesex and a dedicated right turn lane at Main Street. You see the bus lane ends here on the eastbound approach, and that is because of the vast majority, if not all of the buses, take a left at Main Street here. And that will bring us to the Main Street segment. It's a pretty short little appendage of what we're doing here. And the goal here is to connect Center Street to Pleasant Street via Main Street. So going north, I'm going to start with going north because we just came from that direction. There's a dedicated left turning lane onto Pleasant. There's a dedicated through lane for all vehicles. And there's a shared right turn lane onto Irving Street. And you'll see that the dotted bus lane brings you to a very busy Malden Center bus stop that serves the Pleasant Street area, the city center project, and the rest of the businesses in the area. Now we're going to talk about the Center Street between Main Street and Holden and the Northern Strand Trail. So you'll see here, Main Street's on the left, which is the west, and we're going east to Ferry Street. On the westbound approach, there's a very expanded left turn lane. There's a dedicated through lane, and there's a dedicated right turning lane. Again, the reason why we have these large turning lanes is to get as many vehicles out of the way of the traffic that's going straight. The eastbound approach has a dedicated left turning lane onto Ferry Street and a dedicated through lane continue on through Eastern Ave or towards Eastern Ave. And there's a dedicated right turn lane onto Ferry Street by Crying Tiger, and then a lot of great restaurants on that strip. Yang Yang, the Caribbean restaurant, Caribbean Island restaurant. It's all great restaurants on that portion of Ferry Street. I'm very jealous of that portion of Ferry Street. Here's Ferry Street. You see all new crosswalks in this whole area. On the westbound approach, you have a dedicated left turning lane onto Ferry Street, dedicated through lane again, and a dedicated right turning lane onto Ferry Street. This is by the CVS parking lot. You see the high school on the upper right-hand corner. Chevrolet is on the upper left-hand corner. U-Haul is on the bottom of the screen. On the eastbound approach, you have a dedicated left turning lane onto Ferry Street, which we covered in the last slide also. The dedicated through lane again, and a dedicated right turning lane onto Ferry Street. Now, from Holden to Franklin. Here you see on the westbound approach, we have a dedicated right turning lane right at Holden Street. So here you see on the upper left-hand corner, the Malden High School. On the upper right-hand corner, you see the hockey rink. So there's a dedicated lane to kind of get cars onto Holden Street. Particularly important for dropping kids off to school or at their hockey practice. And there's a dedicated through lane. On the eastbound approach, you have a dedicated left turning lane onto Holden Street. Same reason why. Dedicated through lane and a dedicated right turning lane onto Eastern Ave. And this portion of Eastern Ave actually is kind of strange. Eastern Ave dips here and goes down to Eastern Ave where the Dunkin' Donuts is over by Cataldo Ambulance. Here you'll also see that there's going to be improved crossing from the bike path and these on-street bike accommodations to the bike path on the northern portion of the Northern Strand Trail. This crossing is actually being funded through the state in a separate grant, and it's going to look a little different than this, but this is the general gist of what we're talking about. From Warren Ave to Linwood, you'll see on the westbound approach, there's a dedicated left turning lane and a dedicated through lane. On the eastbound approach, there's a left turnaround lane and a dedicated through lane, and the existing parking is maintained. You'll see, or if you've been in Malden for a while, you might know that this was the site of a fatal crash when I was in high school. So I am personally connected to improving the safety in this particular area, and I do hope that we can get this done in this particular area. And again, as I said, existing parking is maintained outside of Suncom. From Linwood Street to Franklin Street, on the westbound approach, you see just a dedicated through lane. On the eastbound approach, you see a dedicated through lane. It's the same. And here is really kind of where you get the greatest of what's going on here. You know, east of Holden and east of Franklin Street, Route 60 is one lane in each direction. And it's like that in every community to the east. And it's like that in every community to the west, west of the Malden Center train station. And it's only in our downtown where it balloons into a 4-lane highway. And the safety of that area has been impacted. There are a lot of pedestrian accidents and there are a lot of vehicle accidents. We hope that this proposal will help alleviate that. So a final executive summary. The winter 2021 proposal that we're presenting tonight, in part is funded through the Community Connections Grant for a transit signal prioritization on Salem Street at the value of $225,000. TSP on Main Street and Center Street, the value of $350,000. And there's another grant we're going for, which is the MassDOT Shared Streets and Spaces Grant Program, which would allow us to do the Center Street bus accommodations, which is valued at $491,000, and a total investment of over $1 million. And this is all coming from grants. It's not going to cost the city of Malden anything. So what are the next steps? We would like to get the Traffic Commission to sign off. We would also like the mayor to sign off on this and the city engineer so that we can actually get these grants, which we do believe we are very qualified for, and we do believe we will be awarded as soon as we get these sign-offs. We need to submit these sign-offs by March 12th, which is in 2 days. The grant award notification would be by the end of March 31st, and we would implement it by May 31st of this year, 2021. So again, this is a recording of the presentation I just gave previously. So I've now been talking for about over 2 hours, 3 hours now. So I apologize if my voice is hoarse. I did document the questions that we received and the people who spoke in for and in opposition to this. So I will go through that now just for the record. And there may be some redundancy, and I apologize for that. So at the meeting, Councillor Linehan of Ward 3 spoke in favor of this and spoke very eloquently about all of the great safety improvements that this will bring to the community and how this will really help our lower income community when it comes to transiting on our public transit system. Councillor Di Maria also spoke in favor of the project. Jerry Leone, who is a bus rider, he lives in the Maplewood area. He spoke in opposition to this and said that he did not think it was worth doing. He doesn't think the buses are full enough currently. Samuel spoke that he is absolutely in favor of this and that he would use the bus more often if something like this was implemented. D. Campbell Tompkins of Chester Street in Ward 2. She mentioned very candidly, and I appreciate her candidness, that she has MS, that it's not getting better. She is 65 and her only mode of transportation is a power wheelchair. And she thinks that this would be a great pedestrian improvement, making this stretch safer for all of our community. Paul Sherman spoke in favor of this, or wrote in favor of this. Dave Senatelica of Ward 1 also spoke in favor of this particular proposal. There was a question about the dates in which the traffic study was conducted, and the dates that the time range that the traffic study was conducted was in 2015, and in 2018 there were traffic counts done, and there was also traffic counts done most recently in 2021. There was a question about some of the data and the graphs for the traffic dangerousness and the equity. Those particular graphs are on a national level. There was a question about the average daily traffic on the bike path. And Councillor Winslow will share later on in this presentation a graph that was generated by the state of Massachusetts based on a traffic or counters based on the usage of the bike path. There was a question about how many residents participated in the Complete Streets prioritization plan, and I do not have those figures directly available, but the Complete Streets prioritization plan and all the relevant documents are on the city's website. There was a question about whether or not traffic lights would need to be replaced. Some traffic lights might be replaced, but by and large, there's not a proposal to replace lights if they're functioning. Primarily, we would be replacing the brains inside the traffic cabinets or the signal cabinets, the signal control boxes. And there was some questions about whether or not we would be able to implement some additional turning lights, and that's something that we can look into with the city engineer through this project. There was a question about whether or not the bike lane would be protected. It is buffered. It does have some space in cross-hatching in some places. There is the idea of maybe doing some like planter barriers in some locations, but it is not going to be a separated bike lane by any means, a separated, dedicated, protected bike lane. There's a statement by Stephanie that I'm excited to see the dedicated bus lane. This should greatly improve things. I remember when the bus lane went into Somerville, the traffic was massively improved there as well. And I believe travel times were improved by 10 to 12 minutes. Do you have any projection of how many minutes of travel time would improve in Malden? Would this be comparable? We do not have the exact, anticipated improvement numbers. A lot of that's based on, what the conditions on the ground when it's implemented for the buses. But we do know that with the transit signal prioritization and with the improvements on Center Street that we're proposing, there will be a significant improvement for pretty much all modes of traffic or travel. Augustus said, thank you to all involved. I'm supportive of making Center Street safer for all users. I'm also in favor of prioritizing the efficient movement of more people, making the street more efficient. Would reducing the number of general purpose lanes that turning lanes and pedestrians would have to cross allow for the elimination of some traffic lights. There are a lot of signalized intersections along Center Street, which are likely only signalized because of how many lanes must be crossed. A reduction in signals would maybe help keep traffic flow and reduce maintenance costs. There's no proposal to eliminate any traffic lights. It's something that could be further studied, but we do not propose that in this current project. Paul says, this looks great. I look forward to this. Is there a plan B if the grant is not received? Unfortunately, if we do not get this grant, it will not be happening, at least not in the near term. We might always be able to try to get it on the complete streets prioritization list, but this is kind of the golden opportunity to get this $1 million in grant funding. Again, Roy asks, basically advocates for a physical barrier for the bike accommodations if possible. Dave Sanatilica from Ward 1 says, I just want to thank you for this informative presentation. Jerry Leone asks, what traffic count year do you use? And similar to his last question, 2015, 2018, and 2021 were analyzed. Ryland said, what specific enhancement will you see to the traffic crossings for the Northern Strand Trail, particularly for cyclists? The two road crossings at Center Street are particularly in need of improvement. Councillor Winslow did chime in here and state and give kind of some feedback based on what the state is proposing, and they will be drastically improving these crossings. There's a expression by August about whether or not the buses that currently use Florence Street could be shifted to Center Street in order to make additional improvements on Florence. And currently, there's no plan to reroute any of the bus lanes or bus routes, but the MBTA is doing the Better Bus Project, and they are evaluating the bus routes. So this could be possible, but it's not something that's part of this project. Jay said, any snowfall of more than 12 plus inches will render that area of Route 60 impassable due to the reduction in lane capacity the snow will create. So I believe Councillor Winslow did elaborate on the fact that the city would maintain the same type of plowing maintenance schedule that we currently have. Dave basically asked, would the City of Malden be able to communicate with the MBTA to upgrade to transit signal priority, where an approaching bus can communicate with the smart traffic light to coordinate so a full bus rider gets the signal priority. And we did answer that that is a central part of this project. It's the actual majority of what we're proposing here. Ho Yin said that he is in support of the proposal because it will make the area safer and more appropriate for a downtown rather than a stretch that acts like a highway. He thanks us for taking this initiative and then asks, will the bus stops in front of Stop and Shop have raised platforms? They currently don't have, are not proposed to be raised platforms, but if we're able to save some money on maybe like paint, if we're able to reduce the amount of paint we use, or find other some type of efficiency, we could look into whether or not a raised a bus stop at Stop and Shop would be feasible. And we'd have to look at the space requirements in that particular location. Stephanie says, thank you, Councillor Linehan, for speaking up on this. As a public transit user, I'm reliant on reliable transportation, and this would be a huge improvement. Kennedy says, I'm a Malden resident, and I highly value public transit and equity and transportation initiatives. I support this project, and thank you for your work to make this happen. Stephanie says that as a commuter, I can say that my experience is not at all like that of Jerry's. I've been stuck on the bus traveling from Linden to the T for 30 to 40 minutes at a time. I could literally walk to the station faster. Every day I see people turned away by the bus because it is too full, which is unacceptable. And that statement was in response to Jerry sharing that he rides the bus regularly, and he believes that this would not be a good use of the grant funds. Peg asks, is this meeting being recorded and it will be available for review? This is Councillor Crow, my apologies. And it was at this point in the meeting that we discovered that we were not recording the meeting, and that is why I am re-recording the meeting and rereading all of the questions that were asked and answering them as closely as to the way I answered them during the meeting. August states, I support this project and support for improved safety of all users and improved efficiency in moving more people on the street. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to everyone involved. You're welcome. Jay says that the bus lane on Washington Street from Nubian Square to Downtown Crossing is shared by both Silver Line buses and bikes. We could open up more roadway by eliminating the bus lane and have the buses and bikes share a dedicated lane. Also could look into contraflow lanes. Thank you, Jay, for the suggestion. Thank you so much for this presentation. This is from Stephanie. Very much in favor of this, and I really appreciate your time and dedication to improving this for Malden residents. Joseph says, just a point, having lived and commuted by bike around the area for the last 7 years, I'm very excited about this change. I was hit by a car on Route 63 years ago. Thankfully, no injury. It's a situation that could have been avoided by having a dedicated lane. There's a question about will the lights on the at the intersections of Main and Ferry have dedicated turn signals? Those specific discussions, we will work with the city engineer when we do the final design. So I don't have the answer off the top of my head right now, but we'll be looking into all those different things, and I'm going to take that down as something for us to look into, is having the dedicated turning lights. Thank you. Petru says, totally in support of this project. Love the bike accommodations, especially with the East Coast Greenway path and the dedicated bus lanes, which will help traffic. Thank you for the presentation. You're welcome. Councillor Spatafora asked that you mentioned police and fire being outfitted with a transmitter. Do private ambulance vehicles also have access to these transmitters? I think this would be a city policy, and we, I believe, could absolutely provide that to ambulance drivers. I think that that's something that we could absolutely take up. I think there would be a big benefit to that. And obviously, ambulances would be allowed to use the bus lanes if they need to get through traffic. G says, thank you for the presentation. I look forward to these enhancements. Brooke from Ward 1 says, not a question, just wanted to thank you for your presentation and work on obtaining these grants. As a car-free household, primarily bike commuters, this proposal is great and will greatly improve safety for more vulnerable road users as well as the overflow of traffic. You're welcome, Brooke. Thank you for the feedback. Ari Taylor says, thank you for this. As a member of a family that utilizes all modes of transportation, this is a great way to accommodate all residents. You're welcome, Ari. We appreciate your feedback. August Blake says, thank you for all involved. I'm supportive of making Center Street safer for all users. I'm also in favor of prioritizing efficient movement of more people and making the street more efficient. Would reducing the number of general purpose travel lanes that turning vehicles and pedestrians would have to cross allow for the elimination of some traffic lights? There are a lot of signalized intersections along Center Street, which are likely only signalized because of how many lanes must be crossed. A reduction in signals would help keep traffic flowing and reduce maintenance costs. That's a great point. We are not proposing the elimination of any lights, but we are hopefully bringing on a transportation planner that can look into that in the future. And that's something that we can pass along to our city engineer to look into. And thank you again for expressing your feedback. Roy asks, the separated lanes in green, are they physical barriers or ground paint? We're currently proposing ground paint only. There's the option to put some like planters to beautify some of the areas, not necessarily in the main area of Center Street, but maybe towards like the northern Strand Trail. So there's some opportunity for barriers, but currently we're proposing just the lines, and we could incorporate some type of barrier in a pilot presentation or manner. August asks, would the buses that currently use Florence Street be able to be shifted to Center Street to make better use of Center Street bus lanes and increase service along Center Street? The Florence Street bus lane could become a bike lane. There's no proposal to shift the routes yet. I do know the MBTA is going through the Better Bus Project, so they are analyzing and evaluating their routes and their buses. So that is something that we could talk to them about. You know, I would be a little hesitant to change it at this point, considering the fact that we just did that investment. The other challenge is, you know, Florence Street is really like a hill, and I would think that potentially more bikers would want to avoid that particular hill than not. But bikes are absolutely allowed to use the current bus lane on Florence Street.
So Ryan, just one other thing, this is Councillor Winslow. The city has received a $150,000 grant through the Gaming Commission to do a transit action plan. This is what Everett used to look at a lot of its transit service and led to their bus lane pilot. So we are in the process of developing the scope of work with that, with some key input from the MBTA. So we may be looking more broadly. If you look at our bus routes, basically our bus routes run on the same routes our trolleys did from 100 years ago. So we haven't really evaluated how those bus routes really work in modern Malden. So one purpose of that transit action plan is to really look at things. But Center Street came up primarily because the MBTA was doing its independent study of bottlenecks, as Councillor O'Malley showed. So that's why it's a key priority. And out of the 10 worst bottlenecks in Boston, Center Street is the only one that has not had any improvements made to reduce bottlenecks. And I know on, like in Everett, reducing the bottlenecks on Broadway decreased travel times to Sullivan Square by at least 10 minutes, which is a huge difference. And those buses, I mean, if you've ever driven down Broadway, and been on a bus, it just can be misery. So to have buses running more quickly is a key thing. But we may look at bus routes more in that transit action plan. So stay tuned on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Winslow. And there's a question about where it ends. It does continue on to across Commercial Street to the bus station. And then Councilor Crowe asks, how many pedestrians have been injured on the Route 60 corridor? I can get that exact. I don't have that exact figure with me now. I do know that the Complete Streets process and task force did look at that, and I'm sure they have that data. So I can reach out to Marie Louise in the mayor's office and see if she has any of that data, as well as the police department. I do know anecdotally there were 2 pedestrians hit like within like 2 weeks by buses over down by Center and Commercial Street, not that long ago. Yeah,
and Councillor, there's a state, every pedestrian accident with injuries gets reported to state, and there's actually like a pedestrian cluster website we can go to, and that can show us probably everything up to like 2019. So that's something that's readily available online for people to look at. But that's like Councillor O'Malley showed those clusters in the early part of the presentation. I don't know if you caught that, but he'll go through that again. And those are all based on real accidents that have been reported to our police and then reported to the MassDOT as required by state law. So so that's all, those are real injury accidents that are reported and by the police. So.
Thank you, Councilor Winslow. And Dee, I see you have your hand raised again. Feel free to speak.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. I do have a question. I'm just curious about the level of competition for getting this $1 million grant. And I'm just wondering if you think, or I would strongly recommend that we really emphasize that we are a gateway community and an environmental justice community. So is there any sense of, our likelihood that we will qualify for this?
Ryan, I can answer that a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, there's 3 grants that are involved here, and the Community Connections grants is sort of leading this. This is one that's actually been submitted. That grant is scoring very high, and so I think we think that because this is a big bottleneck, the major support is this is actually an MBTA grant that we're being asked to support. This is actually not a city grant application. So we are hearing that Malden is very competitive. This is a very important project. So I think we have a high degree of confidence that if the city and the mayor signs off on it, this is going to happen. So it's we're very high in the competition as far as we know. So I think we'd be surprised if we didn't get this. And as someone who's written a lot of grants, I personally have a high degree of confidence in this. So
thank you very much.
Thank you, Dee. Yeah, and the indications that I've received is that we are very high on the priority list for this particular grant by MassDOT. So I want to be sensitive to people's time. We're about 15 minutes, about 12-15 minutes over the allotted 1 hour. I would like to one final request. If anyone would like to speak in favor or against of this one, please feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to put it into the chat box or into the question. And again, just for the record, we didn't record the beginning of this, and we started recording it only during the question and answer session. So after this meeting, I'm going to go back, give the presentation again to an empty room, and I'm going to go over all of the feedback that I have been documenting written here, and just for the record, so that people can watch this going forward or after this meeting. So thank you to Councillor Crowe for suggesting that.
So, Ryan, and before we go back, I do have that one graphic I could share, but I think you have to stop sharing your screen.
Oh yeah,
on just the bike counts. Let me get.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to allow you to do that.
Okay. All right. Let me see how that works. Okay. All right. Where is it? So as some of you, especially people who use the bike trail, you might notice by the gardens by Faulkner Street, there's a couple little posts. And so MassDOT has installed some counters that have been operating since July of 2019 on the trail. And this is just some of the data we are getting from those counters. So you can see, so it's been about 1.5 years of data. This is the data basically through December of 2020. And in the summertime, you can see significant peaks. We've been getting 50,000 users of the trail. That's combined pedestrians and bikes on a typical month in July. Certainly drops off in the colder months, but you can see it pops back up. So this sort of shows not an unexpected thing, but I know personally as someone who bike commuted, if I couldn't bike commute, I would then hop on the bus. So that's the type of thing for this kind of facility can support people who have a more car-free lifestyle. But there's a significant, and I think as we get connections to the T, as there's a direct connection to Boston via the casino and going to Lynn, I think you see these numbers will only increase. And we did see an increase between 2019 and 2020 in part due to the COVID thing. There were a lot of people. The bike trail at one point was the only recreational facility open in the community. So so this is a significant amount of people, and we only see those numbers going up. So just wanted to share that information. So I'll stop sharing and let Councillor O'Malley go on from there.
Thank you, Councillor Winslow. And I just want to thank again. I want to thank everyone who attended. I want to thank Mayor Christensen and Councillor Peg Crowe for their leadership when it comes to the Complete Streets policy. It's a great document, and it I think has really taken us a vast distance to making our streets safer. And I think we were ahead of the curve when it came to that. I do know Chris Murphy from the YWCA was also instrumental in getting that done. And I do appreciate everyone who worked on it. Actually, and also there was a former Ward 4 resident, DJ Wilson, who was also really instrumental in getting the Complete Streets policy done. So I want to give credit where credit's due. Hopefully we're living up to the expectations that the high expectations that you set for us. And this is really kind of the end of it. If there's any last questions, feel free to raise your hand or ask. Again, I will be doing my best to merge these videos together so that it looks better. I think Peg, I saw you said my name in the question. Hold on. Sorry, I just want to make sure we're not missing anything from Councillor Crowe. Great. So thank you again and have a great evening. I'll let you out here a little bit late, and I apologize for that. Talk to you soon, and we'll definitely update the community on the results of this particular proposal. Thank you.